Hello and welcome to Football League World TV. I'm Billy Mulley and today I'm joined by Marcus Ali to basically dive into the situation at Oldham Athletic. Obviously not the best situation at the moment for the Latics, but we hope to inspire and bring some positivity to what is a rough situation at the moment. Of course, we're streaming on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, so make sure to get in the comments any Oldham fans watching or any fans of the EFL that have come across Oldham and maybe have sympathy for the situation that they're in at the moment. First of all, Marcus, how are you getting on today?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, Billy. I'm actually coming into this show feeling a little bit more optimistic about Oldham's situation, having read some of what John Sheridan and Abdallah Lemsigam have been saying in recent weeks. There definitely is, hopefully, light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I was going to say it seems more of a depressing one than the Cambridge one we brought to you the other day. But in terms of what you're saying there does seem to be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And I guess that's what we're going to be talking about today, whether it is a little bit too late and whether the threat of non-league football is actually apparent this season for Oldham. First of all, Marcus, we'll delve into Keith Curle starting the season as the manager. Obviously, it wasn't one of his best stints in League Two. Obviously, having success with Carlisle and even higher level success as well at Northampton in terms of operating there. So with Keith Curle, he's a stalwart of League Two. So what do you think went wrong in terms of sort of the overall picture at Oldham? Do you think much of the blame could be pinned on him, or is it just he was in the middle of it all?
Yeah, I'd tend to agree with what you've said towards the end there. It was a tricky job to take in the first place. I thought it was pretty unfair that Harry Kewell got the sack last season. I thought Oldham were playing some good stuff. They had the second best attack in League Two last season and the worst defence in the league. So it was clear going into this campaign that if one of those was going to improve or drop off, then their fortunes would be very different. Keith Curle proved himself as a competent League Two manager, earning his first promotion in his managerial career with Northampton in 2019-20. And I think it would be unfair for the way that it panned out at Oldham to tarnish his managerial CV somewhat. I think he performed quite admirably in very difficult circumstances at the time that he was manager. It was before Lemsigam had explained that he was going to put the club up for sale and would be in negotiations to find a new owner. So, of course, there was even more fan unrest and less hope and light at the end of the tunnel. So, Curle really felt the brunt of that. Also, looking at this Oldham squad, pretty much every single player, there's only a handful that aren't out of contract in the summer. So, that level of uncertainty to be operating with, I know it's more common in League Two than in the other two EFL tiers. However, how you can keep motivation levels up and keep all the players buying into your ideas when they're feeling so uncertain and insecure about their futures definitely would play into their performances. Whether the actions of the fans sort of had a sway on results, I wouldn't say so. I think it depends on the personalities that you've got in the dressing room. But quite a lot we see these clubs sort of inspired by a bit of fan unrest, and we can actually see teams perform better due to a bit more of an atmosphere, whether it be a positive one or a negative one towards the club. So I do think the situation was tough for Curle to play just because of what went on in the summer, that their squad isn't as strong as it was last season, and just a lack of investment in terms of transfers, in terms of looking to compete with other clubs in League Two. It did seem like Oldham weren't going to be able to perform at the level that they did in 2020-21, particularly well in the first half of this campaign that Curle oversaw.
And just jumping back on something you said there about sort of off-field struggles, doesn't always have to translate to on the pitch failure as well. A team like Derby providing a little bit of inspiration for Oldham. Everything that's going on at Derby in terms of the off-field struggles that they've been dealing very, very well with on the pitch. So do you think that can sort of provide inspiration and a platform for Oldham fans to believe that this season doesn't have to end with a relegation down to the National League?
Well, there's a similar gap between the two clubs. I think Derby at 8 points from safe in the Championship, Oldham 7 in League Two. Um, whether there's too much in comparison, I'm not so sure. They're both clubs that are looking to find a buyer. So I suppose that the old sort of tenants are still in place at Oldham, whereas obviously Mel Morris has left at Derby. But I think the spirit, no matter how it's come about, could definitely act as a role model, something to strive for. Because Derby haven't been able to strengthen their squad as much as they would like. It's a similar case for Oldham. You would have looked at Derby's squad at the start of the season, and I, for one, thought they would get relegated even without any points deductions. That now looks like it definitely won't happen. So even though, in a sense, they're down to the bare bones, John Sheridan's positivity should be able to inspire the squad, and I do expect a positive reaction in some way. Lots of fans, I think, are set to end their boycotts of Boundary Park ahead of tomorrow's home match against Rochdale. So hopefully they can get a positive result there and just start to build some kind of positive momentum, because with them winless in 8 matches and the gap widening between the bottom two and the clubs just above the relegation zone in League Two, they are going to need to act now, and especially with some clubs around them in the league having more chance of being able to strengthen in the remaining 3 days of the transfer window than Oldham will be able to. So the battle could get even tougher, depending on what goes on in the market in the next 3 days. We saw Zach Durnley's contract terminated in the last few days. He's set for a move somewhere in the National League. So if they can keep the current squad of players together, and Sheridan can inspire some of the performances that we saw last season, then they've got an outside chance. And yeah, definitely Derby should be something positive to look towards and try to emulate.
You mentioned this point, John Sheridan coming in, the fact that fans are returning, as you know, it could be a pivotal point in their season. Just going into John Sheridan a little bit more of a cult hero at the club, and in terms of the general good feeling that he brings to the club, is that something that you can see being this notion of a turning point? Is this sort of the start of a revival against Rochdale? You know, they're expecting the biggest crowds that they've had this season. So is this the point they should be looking at and thinking, this is where our fortunes turn?
Well, Sheridan's no stranger to a bit of a crisis club. He was managing at Wigan last season, while they were in administration, I believe. And of course, Swindon, who there was a lot of uncertainty around the future of that club this summer. He comes to Oldham with lots of positive memories. I'm sure, every supporter will be right behind him. So that has to really sort of provide a fresh slate and a fresh start for some of the players. They've got a new manager to try and impress, and one that's been there before, has a lot of experience in League Two and the National League. He was saying in leading up to the match against Dale tomorrow to just forget about the owner and get behind the team, because after all, it is likely that Oldham are a much more attractive club to any prospective buyers if they are in League Two. The National League is a minefield at the moment, with so many clubs spending way more money than even clubs in League Two. We saw Wrexham pay 300k for Ollie Palmer this week. So whether even prospective new owners would be able to compete with clubs like that remains to be seen. It definitely is a more attractive club in League Two, and it enhances their chances of Abdallah Lemsigam being able to get a sale over the line. So yeah, it's a critical point for the club, really. 7 points is enormous. But if they're able to cut that to 4 tomorrow, it looks so much more manageable. So it does really feel like a big day in the course of the season.
And if you're an Oldham fan or have come across Oldham this season, then make sure to get in contact, send a comment in. We've got one here from Wayne, from a Fulham fan. Back in the day, Oldham, it was a good team. I guess, they have seen that success before, and competing with the likes of Fulham, not recently, but not so distantly, not so in the distance. So in terms of the scope for improvement, the scope for staying in the league, in terms of staying in the league, that's got to be the objective, because as we know, the National League is one of those divisions that can suck you in. You think of how competitive it is this year. Two teams can only come up, and you look at the likes of Wrexham and Stockport now that possess bigger budgets than most teams in League Two, and you could probably stretch that into a fair few teams in League One as well. So if this season was to ultimately end in relegation for Oldham, can you see it being a massive, massive task of getting themselves back into the Football League?
Yeah, it'd be very difficult. I had a look before we came on, and Boundary Park holds over 13,000. I mean, you don't see many grounds like that in the National League. Notts County went a few years ago. They're still down there. Tranmere have been down there in recent years. It's a notorious tough division to get out of. I'm a firm believer that there should be three promotion places rather than just the two. But whether that will come to the fore in the next few years remains to be seen. It's going to be extremely difficult for Oldham if they are to fall into the National League this season. John Sheridan is a figure of hope, but with the gap at 7 points, the odds are definitely stacked against him, sadly.
And going on to the owner, controversial owner, Abdullah Lemsigam, safe to say that fans haven't been on side for a while now in terms of what I've been reading today. There's been a coffin outside the club. There's been a plane flown over Boundary Park, sharing fans' discontent. Also been pitch invasions as well. So in that respect, you can tell that in terms of the off-field stuff, there's no relationship there. Sort of the positive news from all this is that he is prepared to sell the club should a suitable offer come in. So in terms of where they are at the moment and Lemsigam, is that a little bit of a positive that, you know, he's not running the club into the ground? He's got, you know, you feel like he should have the best interest of the club. It might not appear so to Oldham fans, but in this moment of time, it's not as if he's purposely running this club into the ground.
Yeah, some owners in certain situations, and sadly, we've seen similar ones to that of Oldham far too often in the EFL in recent years. And some of those owners would be very stubborn and not admit that they'd done anything wrong and just look to continue as they were going. However, that the fans' message and all of the protests has made the message come across to Lemsigam, which just completely justifies the whole campaign around packing out Boundary Park and then boycotting and all the protests that have carried on. It's an example to every fan base that sadly probably will end up in a scenario like this at some point or other in the next few years. That it's usually more than one club that we're talking about with issues like this every season, but that you can get the owners to understand. And Lemsigam doesn't want his name to be attached to possibly the only club that's ever played in the Premier League to be relegated out of the Football League, which sadly is looking like a likely event in the coming months. He said before the Rochdale match to forget about him and just get behind the team. I think even he knows that it will be easier for him to sell the club if they are able to remain in League Two. And it became apparent to him that he was doing the wrong things, and what wasn't. The club weren't sort of trending in the right direction under him, and I think the fans' unrest and protests have definitely helped ram home that message that now has him in a position looking to sell the club. Whether he has the best interests at heart, I'm not sure, but it is definitely a positive that he is looking for new buyers. Obviously, it looks very unlikely that they're going to be able to do anything in the final few days of the transfer window, which does put them at disadvantage to the clubs around them. But overall, speaking longer term, whether Oldham are relegated this season or not, if they are able to get new buyers and new owners, new ownership, then that has to be seen as a huge positive for the club.
And how difficult do you think it is for the players? The off-field noises we've constantly been speaking about, the discontent within fans, and the performances not matching what you'd come to expect from an Oldham team. As you say, there's the potential of them dropping down to the National League and becoming the first side that have played Premier League football to drop out of the Football League system. So in terms of the squad and getting everybody on side, do you still see this game as pivotal, this Rochdale game, a local derby? This could be the perfect opportunity for fans to get on side. And John Sheridan has said, get on side with the team, forget about the owner, just put all your focus into supporting this team and ensuring that they can, well, at least try and remain in the Football League.
Yeah, it does look like a potential turning point. Rochdale haven't been on the best form lately. So yeah, hopefully if Oldham can get the win and start to build some kind of aura around Boundary Park again, that could be sort of the foundations to start looking to at least compete against the drop this season. I suppose going back to whether the protests have affected the players or not, there's possibly an argument to say that the reason why Oldham performed much better last season was because the majority of it was behind closed doors. That's a hypothetical question, but I think it depends on the personalities within the dressing room. If there are really strong leaders, then they should be able to sort of be confident of sort of turning the fans around and turning their attention onto what's going on the pitch. But it's really difficult to say. I think it would depend on that individual group of players and the personalities within that would sort of determine how they would react to it. It's sort of case by case effect. So sometimes it does make them play better, almost like a bit of a carnival atmosphere. Some players really thrive off that, but on a longer term basis, maybe it is a bit detrimental. But I'm sure the majority of the support in tomorrow's match will be getting behind the team, as they have done anyway. All of the process have been pushed towards the owner, not towards anything sort of on the pitch. So yeah, it's a huge opportunity. Rochdale has shown in glimpses that they are a side that should be pushing in the top half of League Two this season. Of course, only coming down from the third tier last term. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Hopefully, they can get plenty of fans in the door and create that cauldron atmosphere, like when we saw Oldham beat Port Vale 3-2 a few months ago. And then that would be the start of building some momentum to hopefully catch Scunthorpe and then have their sights set on maybe Colchester or any of the other teams that are down there.
And as you mentioned there have been the occasional good home wins this season that would certainly boost the confidence. But looking at this League Two table and the sort of associated statistics that go with it, that they're bottom of the league, 7 points from safety, 8 games without a victory in the division and haven't scored in their last 3. So, how necessary, how much of a necessity is it for them to start picking up points imminently and ensuring that that they start this run of form as soon as possible, rather than wait for those teams that are just outside to start picking up points and making the situation look even more bleak.
Yeah, I do think that will happen. Colchester picked up a great win at Salford, their first match under a new manager. Whether they'll be able to continue that bounce remains to be seen. But the likes of Barrow, Stevenage that are down there, maybe with the exception of Carlisle, who are the lowest scorers in the division, I think Barrow and Stevenage are probably clubs that will be able to dig themselves out of it. So in the short term, Oldham at least need to keep pace with the clubs above them. They can't afford for that 7-point gap to grow anymore. Otherwise, they'll be dead and buried by the time we get towards the business end of the season. Sheridan's got a job on his hands. If he can get Dylan Bahambula back to the performance level that we saw last season. Nicky Adams has been a great player in League Two over the years, 35 now, but if he can sort of buy into this cause and be a big player in the second half of the season, then they might have an outside chance. Davis Keylor Dunn is capable of the spectacular, is their top scorer with 6 league goals. But whether he's a player that can do it week in, week out, and in the crunch moments remains to be seen. It's going to be difficult, but Sheridan knows the sort of the mammoth task that is on his hands. He knows the sort of how big the situation is and how much the odds are stacked against them. So yeah, it is crucial that in the next sort of 5 games they are picking up at least 2 wins, at least, or they could be further away adrift, and they could be going down with a whimper, sadly.
And drawing another sort of similarity to Derby, it has been, well, not a similarity, but sort of more of a learning point that they could take from Derby is that the experienced players at Derby have been very important this season, like to Curtis Davies, Phil Jagielka, and Graham Shinney when they were both at the club, and Tom Lawrence as well, have been sort of big leaders, and they've helped the younger players come through. And you mentioned there about Nicky Adams and Hallam Hope, two, uh, EFL players that have been brilliant over the years. You think of Dylan Bahambula as well in terms of his excitement and ability on the football pitch, and you just think, how are Oldham sitting where they are? Because these are very good players that have a lot of ability.
Yeah, I don't think their attacking contingent is one that is sort of relative to their league position. They have proven that they can score goals at times this season, smashed in 5 at home to Forest Green Rovers, who have been immensely solid defensively this season. It is defending their own goal that you worry a little bit more. If they're going to continue to score goals at the rate they have, and they're going to be needing to score 3 goals in a game to win it, then it's not sustainable that they're going to be able to get out of this mess. That'll be the first thing that Sheridan will be looking towards, hoping to get some clean sheets on the board. Rochdale play some attacking football. They are an attack-minded side. So it'll be an interesting test to see how Oldham can handle them, and it will probably show sort of how hard they've been working on the training ground, because if they are able to tighten up defensively, they do have the players in offensive areas to at least get them to within touching distance of safety in the coming months. They've shown at points, even under Keith Curl, they poke their heads above the relegation zone for I'm not sure how long the stretch of games was, but it felt like at least a month or two. They've got the players. They're just going to have to keep pace with the clubs above them, because 7 points is a lot of ground to make up.
And I'll come to you now, Marcus. Just looking over the immediate future for Oldham, 21 games left this season. Can you make a case for them for staying up this season? This new manager bounce that we often associate with the Football League, whether it's a real thing or not, I think that's an argument for another day. But do you think Oldham still have what it takes, and especially under a manager like John Sheridan?
I can't write them off with what John Sheridan's achieved at the club in the past. We've seen these kind of escapes in League Two quite a lot over the years. I remember Macclesfield were able to keep themselves up under Sol Campbell a few years ago. Obviously, Oldham won't want the sort of future forecast that club had, but you can't write them off at this stage. I do think Carlisle are a side that have picked up a bit too many points. I think they're due maybe a poor run. They're on one at the moment, but an extended one. Maybe a side that can be got at in the second half of the season. But ultimately, sadly, I do think at this stage of the season, 7 points is going to be too big of a gap to make up. They haven't been able to strengthen that much in the January transfer window, with clearly positions that needed addressing. So I think there will be an upturn in form. I think they can probably overtake Scunthorpe in the coming months, but whether it'll be enough to get them to safety, I'm not so sure. But I'm hoping that at least worst case scenario, John Sheridan takes the club into the National League in a much better shape than they could have been, and that we'd worried that they would be in at points in this campaign.
I'm sure there'll be additional drama and lots of twists and turns along the way. And another comment here from Wayne: if Oldham go down, they will not come back up. Sorry about that. I guess that again points to the nature of the National League, and as you alluded to there, it should really be 3 teams that do come up. But the sort of competitive nature that we've seen over recent years of increased budgets in the National League, it does make it a lot harder to go up. And if this season ultimately ends in relegation, then it would be a difficult task, at least straight away, to get back into the division. And interestingly, there, Wayne's Fulham are top of the Football League charts, and it's Oldham at the bottom. So the top meets the bottom there. Well, that is all we have for you today. It'll be an interesting battle, I'm sure, to see if Oldham can survive and what the immediate future might look like in terms of the ownership and in general the football sense too. Big thank you to you, Marcus, and also for the comments coming in today. We've got 2 more shows left for you at Football League World TV this week. We've got the EFL Transfer Zone, and we've also got the weekend preview, which I will be back on for. But until then, we'll see you later.